Welcome to episode 5, Love Where You Are. In this episode, we are going to talk about how to not get caught up in the urgency of wanting to be ahead of where you are, because God has called you exactly where you are. You have a purpose and a reason for being in this state of life. This is Persistence in Prayer with Catholic Mindset Coach Kylie Hyde. Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 5. Thank you so much for joining. If you have not subscribed yet, I really want to encourage you, before we ever even get started, to click that subscribe button. I have an incredible guest, Katherine Johnson, joining me next week. I am so excited to have her on. She is a mom who has transitioned from work life to working from home, and is going to share with us some stories about how her prayer life has transitioned, about how Catholic coaching has really helped her so much that she is going to join certification to become a Catholic coach herself. And we're going to talk about the differences between Catholic coaching and spiritual direction. So you don't want to miss it. Again, go ahead and click that subscribe button so that you don't miss out next week. All right. Now, let's jump in. This episode is called Love Where You Are. I don't know about you, but there have been a lot of times in my life where I have not loved where I was at. And this is something I actually just coached on right before I started recording this podcast. It's a feeling that many of us have. Maybe it's we don't love where we are in our home life. Maybe it's we don't love where we are in our personal life. Maybe it's we just don't love where we are in our spiritual life. But this thought shows up, and I want to talk about it because I think it's important. So it is officially spring. We are into Holy Week, and I have to say, for the first time in many, many years, this has been the most peaceful spring in terms of busyness that I have had. And I'm not coaching a sport. For the last several years, I've coached middle school track. And while I really miss those interactions with the kids, I'm not missing the freezing cold weather outside on those yucky days. But I can't help but reflect on the path of many of my athletes and how prominently their actions and mindsets so perfectly reflect how many of us also approach our daily lives and the different tendencies that we can have as we come into different seasons of life. So one of the athletes that comes up a lot, and I'm categorizing here, so the overconfident one, the person who's like, I already know everything. Coach Hein, there's nothing you can teach me that I don't already know. I can learn it from YouTube. I watch TikTok. I can figure this out. I don't need you to help me. Okay. They want to skip ahead to the end. And this shows up in my own life too, right? I want to be great at things. And sometimes I want to skip over all of the work to get there. I see this show up in people's spiritual lives as well. We all want to be in that seventh mansion that St. Teresa of Avila talks about, right? That perfect spiritual union with God, but we don't want to go through all the suffering and all the crap to get there. Sometimes we just want to skip ahead to the end. Or maybe it's we're starting out on a new endeavor. It's a new business. That's what I'm going through myself. And I want to get to the success story, right? But there's a lot of crap that you have to go through. And if you aren't willing to go through all the crap, then you're not going to enjoy the success on the other end anyway. You aren't going to be equipped for what's on the other side. And so it's about learning to just be patient in that moment. I want to talk about the overconfident ones. One of the things that I used to coach in track was discus. So if you have ever seen a discus thrower, they're really great ones. They do a spin and they throw, it looks like a small version of a frisbee, but it's actually much heavier. And it is not thrown like a frisbee, which is a misconception that a lot of people have. So kids see a TikTok video or a YouTube video of what this looks like to throw these discs really, really far, and they just want to do it exactly like the pros. So we start out with some baby steps of how to hold the disc, how to release the disc, how to just gently release and get that discus spinning off of the index finger and in the correct direction, and just little baby steps to get these kids where they need to go. But that's not fun. That's not exciting. It's kind of boring, right? They want to get to the spin move. And so week after week, we work on these fundamentals, but they're not buying it. They want to get to the spin move. So eventually, I'll usually give in and say, okay, let's have a fun day. Everybody back up behind the net. Nobody needs a discus to the forehead because you will end up in the hospital. I'm not calling the ambulance today. So we take some safety precautions. I give them a quick run through, show them what it's kind of supposed to look like, and then I give them a shot. And the disc goes in the net. Sometimes kids fall. Sometimes the disc makes it at 5 feet and then it tomahawks into the ground and is sticking straight up. And they quickly realize that the spin move is not something that they are ready for. Now, every once in a while, I have a kid have a little bit of success for it, but they quickly find that it's something that they are not ready for, and they have to regress and go back to the fundamentals so that they can work their way up. Now, the ones that are coachable often get to that spin move by the end of the season, but the ones who don't really want to listen, well, they end up still working on the fundamentals or doing it the way that they want to do it, and they don't make progress, and they get passed by the end. We see this also show up in the ear ones, right? The ear ones, again, want to be further ahead than they actually are. Of course, no one ever wants to take a step back, but without a solid foundation, we end up getting passed by, and ultimately, a lot of these athletes quit. We see this in our own lives as well. Then we have the forced one. The forced one is the person who is there because someone made them be there, right? They're out for track because their parents made them. They're out for track because they think that they need it for another sport. They are there for the wrong reasons. They don't want to be there. And so ultimately that is reflected in their success or lack of success. We see this show up in people's lives in terms of maybe they are in a career path that is not fulfilling. Perhaps because they went into that career path because someone else told them that they would be good at it. Maybe that's not really where God is calling them. That's not what's actually in their heart, but that is just something that someone told them they would be great at, and so that's where they ended up. They didn't spend that time discerning if this was actually where they are supposed to be. And then there's the patient one. The patient one recognizes a longing for something greater, for something more. But they are also willing to wait for it. They are willing to be coachable. They are willing to try new things. They are willing to move backwards so that ultimately they can move forward. They understand that where they are is not where they have to end up, but with some persistence and dedication, they too can achieve greater things. As we head into Holy Week, I've been thinking a lot about this longing that shows up in the simple things like athletics, but also this longing that shows up in our hearts, the spiritual longing. Maybe your longing is for Lent to just be over so that you can eat all the damn cookies that you want without your spouse calling you out and saying that you gave them up. I've seen that happen, right? Maybe you're longing for Lent to be over because it's felt so dry. Like you haven't had all of those consolations. You've truly been in the desert with Jesus because everything has just felt like it is piling on and it's not going well and you're ready to be over it. Or maybe you're just longing and you don't even know what you're longing for. There's this emptiness inside and you can't pinpoint it. You can't identify it. Maybe you're longing not to be alone. Maybe you're longing to feel appreciated and recognized. Maybe you're longing for peace or for 5 seconds by yourself without a child on your leg. Maybe you're longing to go through a day without feeling guilty for letting someone else down. But the question is, why do we long for things? Why do we struggle to be where we are? Why do we long for things? We long because there's a void in us that only God can fill. And when we're lacking purpose or we're lacking meaning in our life, it's a lack of recognition of how the Lord is moving in us, how He is calling us, or quite possibly even just an extreme lack of disconnect, because we have not either rooted out the sin in our life so that we can see how He is working, or we are not putting in the effort and the time to connect and come to know Him in the way that we should be. This Holy Week gives us a lot of time to reflect on the Lord. And the other day I was meditating on the Stations of the Cross, and it was Saint Alphonsus Liguori's meditations. And he talks about the Lord knows every cross that we will ever be asked to bear. And when we consider that He knows every cross that we will bear, it sheds light on the fact that where we are for a reason. Quite often we can get caught up in this feeling of urgency of wanting to be further along in the process, further along in our journey. We compare to where someone else is, and we get stuck in thinking that there's a problem with where we are. But quite often where we are is where we're supposed to be. We are here because of the choices we've made, but we are also here because God is giving us an invitation to grow. And we cannot grow if we do not allow ourselves to sit in discomfort and to struggle. So I just want to remind you that you're not late. You're not late to getting wherever it is that you're going. You're not behind. You're right where you're supposed to be. When Adam is in the Garden of Eden, he has a choice, and he chooses to go against God. He listens to Satan. But when Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane, he doesn't even acknowledge really that Satan is there. He moves forward and prays for God to help him. It's interesting that the word Gethsemane means olive press. So where ripened olives are crushed to extract their oil. And we think of this hour of darkness that the Lord went through, and this incredible pressure and stress, right? To the point where he was literally sweating blood, and they scientifically say that is possible. It's this torture over this perfect, pure soul, all of a sudden not only being exposed to sin. So if you think about when you do something you know you're not supposed to do for the first time, the guilt that you feel. And then the more you do it, sometimes you start to kind of can push aside that feeling, and it doesn't feel quite as heavy. It is heavy. It's heavier because you're choosing to do it again and again, but it doesn't quite impact you the way that it does the first time that you do something wrong. So you imagine this pure soul that Jesus has, and then all of a sudden, all of the sin of all of eternity is pouring into him in this hour of darkness, and it's this indescribable torture. But also, what a lot of experts say is that Christ also, at the same time, is reflecting on all of the people who he's going to make the sacrifice for that are still going to reject his offer of salvation. And, we were created to find meaning and fulfillment in our friendship with God, but the original sin of Adam and Eve took away that opportunity. And Christ wanted to renew this offer so that we might have hope. And yet, as he's sitting there in his suffering, he has to acknowledge that so many of us are still going to turn away. We're going to have a choice, and we are going to choose to walk away from him. But Christ embraced this discomfort, even though the people closest to him fell asleep when he needed them most. They weren't there. And yet Christ still yearned for them to be there. He longed for his friends to be there in his time of need. And it takes great humility to allow others to see us at our weakest points. And I think that sometimes that's part of the struggle too, with accepting where we are and being content with where we are, is that there are other people who are going to see us in our struggle. There are other people who are going to see us in what we consider our failures, who are going to judge us and compare us to somebody else. But what we have to remember is that we are here for a reason, just as Christ was in that garden and the oil was being pressed from him. When we are in a situation and we are in times of pressure or times of stress, when we can recall that these are crosses that the Lord has placed upon us, and that in that pressure, that is where the fruit is born, and that there will be good that comes. We have to remember to be like the athlete that I talked about at the beginning, the patient one. The patient one who isn't going to give up. The patient one who is going to accept that, okay, this is where I am and God's will be done. Christ knew all that was going to come after the agony in the garden, but he didn't rush it and will it to end immediately. He asked for the strength to endure what was to come. And again, that's something that we have to fall back on. So if you find yourself in a place where you feel like maybe this isn't where I should be, I'm not where I want to be, where I am is a problem, it's too late for me, I'm behind, I want you to remember that where you are is right where you are. And sit with that. Like, if you could believe that thought, that where I am is where I am. Just start with there. Where I am is where I am, and where I am is where the Lord is going to use me. Where I am is where the Lord is forming me for the crosses that are to come. How much better off is our life going to be? So I invite you, if you have any of these thoughts, to not judge it, to not try to skip the steps, because we all know when you skip the steps, you're going to end right back where you were, like the kid who tried the spin move and his discus went backwards or 5 feet, and you have to go all the way back to square one. Just be patient and be present. And when you can't see through the forest and you don't know exactly what's on the other end, you feel this longing and this beckoning, but you don't know what it looks like to get there. You don't know exactly what the picture is going to be on the other side. Just look for the step that you can see and take that one. Start with where you are and move one step forward. Don't be afraid to ask for guidance from someone who has already walked that journey. And lastly, I would just invite you to view things through a toddler's eyes. I saw a meme the other day and I thought it was so perfect. It said, toddlers don't think about how tired they're going to be at the end of the day and not having enough energy to get through. They just give everything they have in the present moment. And I think that is an incredible perspective to have. Give everything you have in this present moment. And maybe it's not where you feel like you should be, but it's exactly where you're supposed to be. If we were all in the same place of success and our destination, there wouldn't be anyone to help. If we're all already at the end, then there's nobody to help. So just think about that. The Lord is building you up so that you are going to peak at exactly the right time to help the person that is coming behind you, that is going to need you. You're not late. The Lord knows every cross that you're going to be asked to bear, and He is just building you up. There's a quote by Saint Teresa of Calcutta that says, "That terrible longing keeps growing, and I feel as if something will break in me one day. And then that darkness, that loneliness, that feeling of terrible aloneness. Heaven from every side is closed. And yet I long for God. I long to love Him with every drop of life in me, and I want to love Him with a deep and personal love." Even the saints still felt that longing, and the closer you grow to the Lord, the deeper that longing is going to feel, because the closer you get to Him, the more you desire of Him. So longing is not a bad thing, as long as it is a properly ordered thing. And ultimately, just always remember that you get to decide if where you are is where you want to stay. You also get to decide if you want to accept where you are. And acceptance is the first step that is really going to bring you peace. So accept it, don't judge it. We need to remember that God did not put us on this earth alone, and we are all traveling together toward the same purpose. And without each and every one of us in the place that we are, we cannot all get to where we need to be. Because if I am already 10 steps ahead where I feel like I want to be and I need to be, then what happens to all of those people who need me where I am? What happens to all of those students that I cannot serve because I'm already 10 steps ahead? And we have to remember that God has placed us in these exact moments exactly as we are, and not get frustrated with this feeling of urgency or feeling like we need to be somewhere else. Because when we rest in those feelings of the I should be somewhere else rather than I could be somewhere else, we're just going to spiral, and we're going to get frustrated, and we're going to get upset. And then we are no longer serving our purpose of where we are, which is why we are where we are. So again, I know I've said it several times, but just rest where you are. The Lord is never going to fail you. Enjoy the journey. Enjoy the moment. Be like the toddler who has no concept of how tired they're going to be later. They're just going to give their all exactly where they're at. They're going to love where they are. They're going to be present to the people around them. And when you do that and you show up in your day loving exactly where you are, still dreaming and hoping for the future and taking that step forward, but acknowledging that God has you here for a reason, that He sees all of the crosses down the road, and He is preparing you for those incredible moments that He has created you for. You are going to feel so much better. You are going to walk forward in your life fulfilled. And that's what this is all about, being fulfilled as we travel on that journey to union with God. Thank you so much for joining this week, and I can't wait to see you next Tuesday as Katherine Johnson joins me in an incredible episode. I'll see you then. And I'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much for joining in. Remember to subscribe and share with your friends. This is Persistence in Prayer with Catholic Mindset Coach Kylie Hine. If you're curious about Catholic coaching and you want to find out more about managing your mindset so that you can have peace in the chaos and build connections with your loved ones, reach out on Instagram at Kylie M. Hine.